This episode of the WP Minute is brought to you by Pressable. You know what the best hosting feels like? Nothing. No panic alerts, no mystery downtime, no "hey, is the site down?" Slack messages. That's the Pressable experience. WordPress hosting so reliable you forget it's even there. We keep your site fast, secure, and up 100% of the time, so you can get back to building, selling, blogging, or binging cat videos. No judgment, whatever you want to do. Go to pressable.com/WP Minute and try hosting that disappears in all the right ways. Pressable.com/WP Minute. Pressable.com/WP Minute. Thanks, Pressable, for supporting the show.
I'm your host, Eric Karkovac, and today I've got the co-founders of Clay, Zachary Hamid and Matthew Achariam. They founded Clay in 2018. Is that right, guys?
Correct.
Yep.
Thanks for being on with me. So I think Clay is an interesting product. We're going to get into the acquisition by Automattic in a little bit, but this app is kind of interesting to me because, you know, we have our contacts so spread out these days, right? You've got your Facebook accounts, your LinkedIn accounts, Twitter. Our stuff is spread out all over the place, and I was doing a little bit of research, and I honestly had not heard of Clay before this past week, but it is a really cool app. I really am interested to hear a little bit more about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how it started and who it's for?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eric, for having us. We started Clay because we felt that exact pain point, that sort of our contacts were in so many disparate places. You know, I think a lot of people have their phone contacts and they have, you know, your top, you know, family members in there, friends in there. But there's a long set of people below that you add over time, business relationships, personal relationships that often you'll just add and you'll never sort of re-look at again in your phone contacts. And so what Matt and I both had experiences where we were sort of very naturally trying to keep in touch with people over time. And we're intentionally broad there. You know, it's not just personal connections or professional connections, it's both. And we had been burned by a lot of previous apps that had come in the space, you know, in the early, 2010s, late 2000s. There were a lot of either contact apps or Web 2.0 sort of social apps, like social address book type apps, all of which, tried to pull from maybe your Twitter graph or your Facebook, friends and things like that. And very quickly, they would last 1 or 2 years and they would be shut down. And so when we started Clay, we had a few core principles and tenets, but one of them was, number one, that these are your contacts. They should be yours. There's a lot of sort of data ownership and portability that we believed in around that. And then there was also there was a very strong design ethos. We really wanted to make it something that you enjoyed using, that felt at home on your home screen, that was very tightly integrated with all of the different ecosystems that we partner with today. And then Matt and I also, we have been in the tech ecosystem, tech community since graduating college, basically. And we got our start, developing WordPress sites. So I think that ethos of, let's have plugins, let's have, integrations that allow you to extend and build the product into what you want it to be. That was very sort of core to sort of what we wanted Clay to be. And so we actually just built it for ourselves. We're both sort of engineers, and, I built the iPhone app and Matt built the website and the back end and the design. And we just sort of put up a landing site and said, does anybody want this? And we actually did that with a story, which is still on our website, clay.earth/story, where we talked about actually David Rockefeller, who had index cards, and he would take notes of every meeting he had, and just a really interesting sort of vignette about somebody who, did this. And when we put that up, people came out of droves and were like, hey, I actually do this too. I just take notes after meetings, or I just jot down in my notes app, a few things that I remember about a person. And so that was really the origin of Clay. And we then set off to build what we thought would be the best. We call it a home for your relationships. So a place where your personal, professional, friends, connections, people can live along with the information about them.
Yeah, I thought I read that story about Mr. Rockefeller, and I thought that was very interesting. Somebody in that position to keep this book, basically of all the contacts he made, no matter who they were or where they were from. Just that ability to go back and remember something, a detail about somebody. So I can see how Clay kind of is the modern version of that. And I think, as I said, I think it's needed because we have so many different social networks. We have so many different places to connect with people. I see all the integrations you guys have right now. I see ChatGPT as part of it, Gmail, Google Calendar, Facebook, X, Notion, iMessage. There are a few others going in there. I mean, what was the challenge maybe in getting that interface to work with all of those different services and to kind of tie it in a way that folks using the service could actually kind of, easily read and understand?
Totally. This is we could spend a lot of time on this. And I think the main principle that drove us when we were sort of understanding and solving this need was really understanding the problem. So I think Lasted and I, Zach, tallied this number up. Like, we almost had 1,000 discussions via email, via calls like this, with just people just trying to understand really deeply what they were trying to do. And I think there were a couple of themes that emerged. One thing was that this idea that everything is fragmented and everywhere. And so we said, cool, the first thing that we need to do is really bring everyone into one place. And so that's why Home for Your Relationships was the tagline that we came up with. Once we had everyone in that one place, it was then, okay, what do you do with this? And so most people really had a lot of issues with reaching the limits of their memory. So if you look into the studies, there's Dunbar's number, there's a whole host of other things that talks about the limits of us as humans, which, tops out at having a general level of awareness of 150 people or so. And so once you reach that edge, it becomes actually very, very difficult biologically for us to keep those relationships top of mind. So we said, hey, let's just develop a suite of tools, because we're tool builders, that actually address those things. And all the way from like automated reconnect reminders to bringing key moments in. And so that was that set of features. And so we have a bunch of features around that. And finally, once you have that all in one place, Zach alluded to this earlier, but there's this idea of data portability where your relationships are inherently yours. You need a beautiful place for them to live, and then you want to do things with them. So whether it's moving them into ChatGPT so you can ask queries about your network, or productivity software, or emails, or weddings, or what have you, we had to make those very clear. So those were the three sort of like problem areas that we noticed, and we said, let's just keep listening to our customers and solving problems. And it sounds very simple, but it took us years to sort of like hone in on that and really like craft and refine, through each iteration. And we ship very, very quickly. We have weekly product cycles, and we almost ship daily in a lot of cases for different features. And so that allowed us to really address that wide swath of problems. And it just keeps going back to this human aspect of it, right? Like in humanized sort of human-focused design, which has been very popular lately in consumer software.
Yeah, I mean, that I can only imagine the challenge just in working with all the different APIs that you have to get through. I know just working with Meta's APIs or Google's APIs can be a challenge in itself. So then you're kind of multiplying that by all these different services you're trying to pull together and put it into something that like is easy to consume. So I can only imagine, what you've had to go through for that. Now, I've also seen that you guys have some AI capabilities with this now, including the cool little demo on your site where, you can email someone through an AI prompt and invite them to dinner or something like that. How important is that to where you guys are going here as we move on?
Yeah, I think, we are users of these products. We, are trying to understand sort of the edges of what they make possible. And I think again, like Matt said, a lot of what we do is driven by our users and driven by our sort of what they're looking to do and where they're looking to do it. And a lot of them have moved a lot of their productivity work into some of these tools. Now, a lot of what we think about is, number one, what does our data set make possible that it is not possible in these tools today? And what we found is, just using it on like my personal network, when you're looking for someone, when you're trying to draft an email, when you're doing any sort of not only writing work but also productivity work, it's incredibly helpful either via the ChatGPT integration we have or via like MCP tools, which we also open sourced, to be able to bring in knowledge of your contacts. And we have that video, like you mentioned. What we're trying to show there is that the biggest missing piece, we believe, today in a lot of these AI tools is the personal context part. And there are many different ways, different tools. Every company's trying to solve that in a different way. Even last week, you saw at WWDC, Apple is trying to do more on-device context and learning and inference. And we're very excited about that. And day one, Automattic product day one was featured in that as well. And so whether it's on device, whether it's as part of, an MCP tool, as part of Claude or something, or it's a ChatGPT integration, what we're trying to think about is what does that unlock as a product experience and as an output for some of these tools. And so we did an initial rollout of Nexus, our AI Copilot, and our members were back to us and they were like, I use this for making groups of people and searching my network more quickly. I use it for drafting emails. I use it for drafting intros between two people where, somebody would spend 20 minutes looking at like, okay, let me pull up this person's background and my notes about them and how we met, and then this other person's background or whatever. And they would write this like very personalized, crafted email. And, AI cannot do that today, but using Clay, it can get you much closer than you would be if you just said, introduce these two people, because we have the understanding of who the person is, we have the understanding of how you know them, we have the understanding of the context of the relationship, and we're bringing that together in a way that is much more limited in scope for the AI. So from a privacy perspective, we're trying to keep it as limited as possible, and again, all of this is opt-in, and a lot of what we're thinking about is, okay, what does it look like, again, on device, just on your computer? What does that unlock from a productivity perspective as well? So there's a number of different tools, and the space changes so quickly, which is really exciting to us. Yes. And there's like new things every week. But like I said, a lot of it has been driven by our members coming to us and saying, okay, I'm using these 5 different tools. Like, what can I do with this? And how do I integrate data from other systems into Clay? And then how do I get data from Clay that I want in these other systems? And so we work with them to make that possible.
Yeah, it just seems like a very natural extension to where we're at now. We're all scattered in our existence online, and now we can bring everything together, and we can now use an AI tool to kind of take that to the next step, to where, as you said, you're looking at relationships, the context of how you know someone. I thought it was interesting. Even you had, you last saw this person like 6 months ago, and maybe it's time to reconnect, that kind of thing, which I found fascinating. But the next step in this, of course, is your acquisition by Automattic. I was wondering, how did that come about? I mean, is that something you guys have been looking for a long time as far as being acquired, or did this sort of happen out of the blue?
Totally. So the story is actually pretty interesting and pretty compelling. So I think one of the things that opened us up to this was actually by nature of building the product. So I mentioned earlier, the first stage was sort of bringing your relationships in and then learning how to care for them. And then that third step was sort of like getting them out into the tools that you want, into the ecosystems that you want. And a little over a year ago, and we'd known, obviously, of Matt, and we've been huge WordPress fans. I think Zach and I both shared the story that we both uniquely, at the ages of like 13 and 15, had put out WordPress blogs, and that'd been our first foray. Zach's a PHP developer. I learned PHP, not as good as him, but I dabbled with it as well. And so I think it turned out to be a very poignant arc where we had the chance last year to integrate with Gravatar, which we believe is like, one of the biggest identity platforms on the internet, and sort of has done it really well. And that integration went really well. We got to know Matt. We got to understand what he's building towards. And I think the thing that we uniquely bonded on was we as a company are uniquely mission driven. Like, we always felt like this idea of like trying to improve or expand conscientiousness. And that was always our North Star. And the thing that we realized after working with Automattic and Matt was there was this idea that open source was one of the most powerful sort of forces in our lifetime. And we had always felt that, and we had always benefited that as developers, as folks working in the ecosystem. And we realized this is how we could achieve our mission. And so those conversations sort of naturally evolved into like, hey, like, why don't we team up and work on this together? And it felt supernatural. We were doing really well, and we felt like this could accelerate our mission. And so not only that, as we got deeper into these conversations, we realized that the culture was very similar. We were building towards sort of this user-centric, very users, like we respect our users. And we want to build wonderful things that helps move humanity forward. And I think that's always been a core value for them. And yeah, and so that led to us being like, let's team up and work on this together. And we've only only been accelerating from there, right, Zach? I feel like that's probably the
yeah, and it's really interesting to see how all of Automattic's properties work across this. And I didn't, you've mentioned some of them, Eric, but you've got Gravatar, which is where we started the integration. There's Beeper, which we're very excited about, and the sort of like messaging pillar and how we integrate there. There's also products like Jetpack CRM and other sort of people primitives in WordPress itself, and then also other Automattic properties that are particularly interesting. So the through line of identity and networks goes across and cuts across a lot of Automattic's properties, and I think it's been a core focus for them, but it's also something that we're particularly excited about because the internet, their sort of position as a standard bearer for internet standards and internet sort of APIs, there's never been a more exciting time to be innovating in the space, given how many new platforms are out there, open source platforms and standards are coming up. So you're seeing that come out from Automattic. They're part of working groups, they're part of consortia, they're working with other partners in the space, and so that is also particularly exciting to us.
So yeah, it seems like a bit of a good time to be doing this. With Automattic, it has been acquiring some other products, like you said, Beeper, I think Day One was another one, that are kind of in the business of connecting people. So I would have to think that Automattic's got a lot of plans for you guys with with some integrations and things like that. What are your long-term goals now with this? Has that changed a little bit since the acquisition?
I would say it's, again, I think the way we've thinking about it, it's the long-term mission has stayed the same, but now we can accomplish it a little faster through these integrations and through this idea that, there's this company and organization that's been doing this for 20 years and really, really understands how to do this well. So there's a lot of synergies. I think Matt talks about this model where we all learn from each other. So we're very excited to partner up with the Beeper team and work very closely with them, and then the Gravatar team, and then a whole host of any Automattic product which carries and works with identity is a potential entry point for us. And so we've identified the two that feel the most natural as the first fit. But moving forward, you can see this idea that like identity becoming, and Matt talks a little bit about this in his announcement post, where it really is a primitive, just like anything else on the internet. And so the right person to do it, or the right company to do it, is Automattic. And so we feel uniquely empowered by that. And I think the thing that we've always had in the back of our heads was we're very, very dogmatic about this mission. But we were flexible in the journey and how to get there. And this was a great opportunity for us to sort of move quickly towards that achieving that.
Yeah, I would think that the experience that they have in connecting people and getting apps out there into the public, that has to be a great benefit for you guys.
Totally, yeah, and that's exactly the more we explore it, the more we realize like, wow, like this is really beneficial, or mutually so. And I think that's rare. And that's why we keep like reiterating that, like to find such a natural fit over time with someone from culturally, from a values perspective is incredibly rare, and we want to honor that and work towards making our vision a reality.
I'd have to imagine too, like when you're in that stage of maybe being acquired, we see it so often in tech that a large conglomerate will come out and buy a smaller firm, and there's always hope for growth and things like that, and they just kind of let it stagnate. But we've seen that time and again, and I kind of feel like Automattic is not one of those companies that's going to do that. They actually seem to want to continue developing and let the whoever they acquire kind of continue on their path, which I think as a founder would be pretty attractive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, and we tried to sort of understand. We've seen it ourselves as users of all of these products. I was a user of Day One for 5 or 10 years probably, or at least I've had it on my phone for that long. Same with Pocket Casts. I think we've used all these products ourselves, and I certainly did not feel the velocity go down. And I think going through the process, we were like, okay, let's chat with teams there, chat with people who have gone through it. Like, what is the are we seeing something different? Are you somehow pushing against the grain on some of these things? And the answer is no. Like, that's because of, not in spite of, Automattic support and Automattic's belief in these products remaining largely independent with some sort of shared infrastructure, shared sort of help between them. But for the most part, Day One is doing what Day One is doing and has always done, and is the app that I loved and downloaded that won an Apple Design Award. And same for Beeper, and same for Pocket Casts. And so, I think, to your point, and again, when we started Clay, a lot of what we were pushing it back against is these apps that were sort of more transient and did not have that same long-term focus. And you see this with Matt and his focus on decades-long horizons, and 100 years, supporting WordPress and WordPress blogs for 100 years. And I think there's a long-term focus and a long-term belief in the permanence of the web, like making sure that this data does stay up, and that like links stay up, and like all of these things do not shut down, because it does actually, like, that rots over time. And we're really real strong believers in that. And all these apps I think, hold that to the same standard. Day One has all of your most valuable memories. Beeper has all of your most valuable conversations. Like, you do not want those things to disappear tomorrow. And so when you're building an app like that, and we feel this similarly, it's a real responsibility to your users, to your members, to hold that to account, to be very clear and communicative about what is happening with that data, and whether it's privacy, security, even just like, platforms change over time. Like, you can't do a big migration without making sure that all the data comes along with it. And so that that undergirds a lot of what I think every Automattic property does. Same for WordPress, same for the independent apps. So that's really exciting to us.
Yeah, I mean, even when you think about WordPress, it's famous for backwards compatibility. I'm a web designer. I've had sites that are 10, 15 years old, and I can still update them, and they still work, which is kind of a miracle in modern software. We don't have to overhaul things.
It really is.
Yeah. As a user. So I think you're kind of in the right spot if that's your long-term goal, to keep that data going and keep it alive. And it seems like a situation for you where you're just allowed to be yourself, kind of, and do your thing. I noticed you guys are staying on. It seems like the staffing is staying the same, which I think is always good news when something like this happens.
Yep, exactly. Both. And that's what we're also very excited about. So our entire team is forging ahead, and it's largely business as usual, which is very, very nice to hear, both for ourselves and also for the team, for our customers who, they didn't want anything to change, and largely nothing will change. If anything, everything gets better. Every part of the product will get better. Our velocity, our ability to do new integrations and things will get better.
Well, that sounds great. So I congratulate you guys on the acquisition. But before we go, I do have to ask one question, because this is a WordPress podcast. What kind of WordPress integrations are we going to see? And will we see them next week, or will it be a little bit longer than that?
We've talked with Matt a little bit about this. I think we are putting together that roadmap. I think high level, again, not promising anything, but Matt has thought for a very long time about what the people primitive looks like within WordPress. And there are all sorts of places, as a WordPress user myself, where it would be nice, now that you have Gutenberg and you have sort of the ability to add blocks. We've seen this with actually our Notion integration as well. Similarly, they had this idea of, in internal docs, you're mentioning other people all the time, and what does it look like when I @mention somebody, or what does that like block look like? And Gutenberg and WordPress, you're messaging people all the time, you're commenting with other people, you're mentioning other blogs or people that are represented by blogs. So there's a lot of people related stuff, and we haven't even touched on the sort of other systems that people build on top of WordPress that also touch on people, including CRM. So there's a lot of thinking and complexity that and sort of institutional memory that the whole WordPress ecosystem has around that. And so we're downloading that and thinking through it. But we're really excited about the possibilities of the people primitive, the relationship primitive, and how that links in through identity, contacts, comments, all of that stuff.
It seems, I mean, I could even imagine, membership sites, commerce sites. I mean, that would be an interesting integration with customer relationship data, all those types of things. It just seems like it could really skyrocket from there. And then when you're tying AI in with it, I could be using WooCommerce and I have an order and maybe I ask AI to send an email to this customer and thank them for what they purchased. And hey, if you need this, why don't we do an upsell? That type of thing just seems like it's a natural fit. Well,
sorry, just one other thing on that before. No, yeah, we love that, and I think the idea that your customers and your audience and your blog audience, your mailing list audience, like all of those things, we've had our customers talk to us about like, hey, I want to merge these things together, and I want to know that somebody who was they were subscribed to my newsletter for a while, and then they placed an order, and they also followed me on social media, and they subscribed to my blog, and like all of those things. I think creators and businesses really think about it holistically, but a lot of modern software views it, what is the difference really between a subscriber and a customer? Like at the end of the day, you have an email address and that thing can work across all of those properties. So we're very excited by that and by the, I think WordPress operates in all of those different verticals and there's very few players that do. So that's one that we're also excited about.
Yeah, it would seem like there's a lot of potential here to integrate Clay into all sorts of Automattic products and maybe even, more third parties, I'm sure. But guys, I want to thank you again for coming here today. I appreciate your time and again, congratulations on the acquisition. I hope everything goes the way you're hoping, and thanks for being on the WP Minute.
Thank you, Eric. It was delightful to be here. It's rare that we get the time and space to reflect on our work, and for someone to so thoughtfully ask a bunch of really, really poignant questions. So thank you as well for having us, and we really appreciate it, and happy to do it again.
Awesome. Maybe we'll catch up in a year or two and see what else we've got going on. I can only imagine where you guys are going to be in that bit of time.
Would love that.
All right. Well, thank you again, and good luck.